I believe this lady was just a little bit quicker on the draw. Yes, ma'am. Mr. John Bassett or Kylan Cagle, what is the specific distance of the width of the footprint?
The adjacent levee top width, as John mentioned earlier, is 16 feet. So the levee gets 16 feet wider, and it comes down to a 2-to-1 slope, which will go primarily over the top of the existing canal that's there, that's south of the fence that you have there now. So it doesn't move really into the golf course significantly. I don't know exactly how many feet that is, but beyond that, we have 2 utility corridors, one for SMUD, which is 15 feet wide. There'll be utility poles at the toe of the slope of the levee. And then some of you may not know, but there's an existing water line that goes through the fairway. That will have to go out another 15 feet beyond the SMUD pole line. So it'll be about 30 feet of utility easement that will be primarily, except for the SMUD overheads, the water line will be, you won't see any of it, it'll be all underground.
So they'll keep grass back in on top of that once it's done?
On the top of the levee gets an aggregate base surface. The levee slopes get native vegetation. The corridor will get either native vegetation or the portion that might be along the fairway will be regrassed as the fairway.
Are they going to replant the trees?
No.
At a time.
Since you're taking the trees out, you're widening the levee, are you putting in a wall between the levee and Swallow's Nest along that area?
The fence will be restored, but there is no plan to create a wall at that location now.
Hole number 2, the green for number 2 and fairway number 3 and hole number 4. What's the impact on as far as the golf course is concerned?
Mr. Bassett, if you wish, certainly, Mr. Bassett described the impact, and there may be some narrowing of the course, but we understand that the current design still allows us to restore a functional golf course. It may be more challenging, and I understand that it already is quite challenging, but the current design allows for, at all those places, the restoration of a functional golf course. The question was regarding, I believe, the water feature, the water hazard near the third green. Yes. That may or may not be removed. It currently is a under seepage weakness. We are trying to sharpen our pencils, but I don't want anyone to go away thinking, oh, that's great, they'll say, no. As it currently stands, we may be turning it into a sand trap.
Okay, 3473, I believe, is the home which I think we all know is going to get taken away. Okay, there is a house directly opposite. It's just in a couple of feet, maybe, so it's not here. This house is maybe there.
Cut the mic up.
So my question is, are you going to come in very sharply? Because behind that home is an electrical substation of some kind. So I don't understand how you're just going to come in so sharply and just take one house.
The real estate questions, because SAFCA leads the real estate process, these questions I'm going to pass to Mr. Bassett.
One of the things that you'll see as you go along the levee, the levee itself takes a bit of a bend there. So as that house sits kind of at the toe of the levee there, the levee takes a bend around what's the city sump 160, the big pump station that's over there. So as the levee goes that way, the house sits there. Yes, we have to take the one house, but it doesn't affect the rest of the stuff over in that corner.
Show us on the map.
It's not at a scale, but if I heard what you said correctly, John, if I can paraphrase, the levee alignment changes relatively suddenly, or at least notably in that area. And so that's what allows the one residence, but not anything further, to be in peril at this location.
So can I ask where SMUD is in all this? Is there any chance they can be putting the lines underground with all the winds and the other trees that are here so that they're not falling down?
To repeat, because I understand this meeting is being recorded, we have begun the discussion with SMUD. They are aware their utilities need to be relocated. However, they have not passed on to us any clear indication of what their design will be. We are, at this point, assuming that it will be an overhead line. Perhaps there is something that will change, but that's our assumption at this point in time.
One of the beauties of living in Swallow's Nest is our security. What's going to happen with the fence? And we do have the trees, and they're an additional barrier for us that live along that fairway and the community at large.
The Swallow's Nest will remain a gated community. Regarding the trees, as we've already discussed, within the construction footprint, the trees are going to be removed. I'm not familiar at this point with the potential for things that may occur in between the construction footprint and the golf course. I have a suspicion, because we've got it down to about the 2 foot, not much more.
What does that mean? Down to the 2 foot? What does that mean?
There will be a fence that goes back. That's one of the things that we will discuss with the levee committee as we move forward, and they will, work with the golf course designers to figure out what exactly needs to go back in there and what can go back, because this could be really close to the SMUD poles, and you have to have them separate a little bit.
There is temporary security fencing that goes in during the construction.
The orange plastic?
No.
Okay.
6 foot chain. We have.
Yeah, I'm curious. Next to the housing development, just to the east of us, from what I understand, you're taking out that whole first row of houses. Okay, is that the case? And if so, why is there a different criterion for them than there is for us? Because there's been, news information on the news that like 15 houses, essentially that whole front row of houses is going.
Okay, so I need to really at this point ask that we keep questions directly related to Swallow's Nest today.
And I'll give a short answer. It's not, all the 15 houses are not in that location, and the levee design is the same. So they're similar.
I guess what would help us, you say you have 65% design drawings, I heard that. As soon as possible to have a surveyor put some flags out so we can visualize. Are we losing half of our second green or this or that? And that's my main question. That would help everyone here know what the heck's going on. And my other question is, I'm a licensed civil engineer, and I actually worked for the Corps 6 years, a long time ago. But anyhow, as far as you're requiring property from us, is that correct? Okay, what about as far as temporary construction easements? And also, will there be a permanent easement needed for the permanent O&M of the levee? Where they'd have to come on our property? And I'm asking that because as an association, we might probably need to get an attorney to start valuing these things, and as far as negotiating that stuff, because we're going to be impacted for a year of construction where it's going to be a mess here. And if you can explain the process of real estate for not just buying the land, but the temporary construction easement and the permanent one, I appreciate that.
Just as an FYI, the board last night approved looking for an eminent domain specialized attorney so that we can start protecting all of our rights and looking at those very same things.
So this is one of the things that we did meet Monday with your levee committee and explain the process. I believe they briefed the board last night. So your committee is already in that process of what is the governmental acquisition process. I'm sure you can contact them and they can explain and go through it. We did provide a right of entry form that someone with the board would have to sign, and then we would go in and stake the location of the water line easement, the SMUD easement, the toe of the levee, and various other things at that time.
In answer to the gentleman's question about the staking, I have the signed document by John Lauer, our president, so that I will hand that to you tonight.
So I understand the appraisal process for the houses that are going to be taken under eminent domain. But those of us that are going to continue to live here and probably, I would suspect, have our property values diminished with elimination of a golf hole or a narrowing of that, is there any process for claims or anything for loss of value to existing property?
And that again is what we're looking at from the attorney.
You're going to have to speak to your attorney. And they will advise you on what your various rights are. So we don't give legal advice.
What impact will there be on our values? Again, I understand the question, but if we're going to sell our properties, the disclosure to the new owner, what impact is that going to have on our values as we move forward?
Again, that's going to be our attorney that's going to advise us and protect us. Hopefully, we are in the process of looking for an eminent domain who's going to look not only at what our property values are, if there's potential loss to the golf course and how that affects our properties. Those of us that are not directly impacted by the sale of a home. And I get you're looking forward because of that's what well, once we get the attorney, we will be addressing all of those concerns. We just voted on that last night. We will be looking we have been provided a couple of names of different attorneys, and we are going to be meeting hopefully within the next month with those attorneys to start being proactive in this process as it pertains to all of us as homeowners. That's the best we can do for right now.
When this is all done, when we have 100-year floodplain, a 500, what? And how will that affect our flood insurance?
I'm going to answer this one because the Corps' authorization doesn't have a specific level of flood protection tied to it. They have a set level of improvements. However, the state and SAFCA have a goal of 200-year level of protection once this project is done. So right now, you have mandatory flood insurance if you have a federally backed mortgage. Once you get to a 100-year level, you can have that as an option. But once you get to 100 level, you also get what's called a preferred rate policy, and many of you hopefully have those right now because you got them before the rate zoning changed. So we always recommend that you continue your flood insurance, and once the project is complete, it'll be much cheaper than you would otherwise have if you were still in a flood zone, but you're still already probably paying the same rate you would continue on.
My question is kind of along the lines of what Jan was asking, which I guess I'm trying to understand some clarification on the property line. So basically, from the fence line that's currently there behind the second green that runs all the way along number 3, number 4, I understand those trees that are on the opposite side of our fence line need to go. How far inland from the fence line now are we going to be losing? Which essentially cuts into possibly the second green, the third fairway, and our 4th hole. So how many feet from our fence line are coming in with the levee, or are we losing?
So most of the time, the toe of the levee and the patrol road come to not much past the fence line as it is right now. You'll have the easements beyond that, but most of the time the levee comes down, goes over the top of the canal and the canal easement that is there, but doesn't really encroach into the fairway. So that's one of the things that will be shown when we go out and do the staking, was where is the new tow a levee, which would probably be south of the fence line, you want to see it. Where is the new tow of levee patrol road, and then where are the SMUD and water line easements? So we'll show that in the field when we do the staking. I'm sure you can all go out and look at it.
Do you know when to stake?
So does that mean the easement, yeah, how does that impact?
Probably in the December timeframe. One of the things that once you decide on your attorney, he's going to want to get an appraiser. They're going to also want to see the stakes and take pictures of everything. So I don't know if you want to leave these stakes in the middle of your fairway for months, but we can coordinate the timeline on the staking.
So what is the projected timeline for the finish of the entire project where we would acquire our 200-year flood plan for our insurance possibly?
For the remainder of the Natomas levee improvements, the schedule is for the end of 2024.
I had heard something in regards to the homeless that live on our river being a portion of a problem digging out our levee. I had heard possibly that there might be a law against homeless people living on our levee, and if that is in fact the case, okay.
I'll take it. There we go. Mr. Kevin King of RD 1000, yes.
Hi, Kevin King, General Manager of RD 1000. You are correct. There is a problem with the homelessness and the impacts to the levee system. So I started at RD 1000 in February of this last year, and immediately one of the concerns my board had was homelessness impacts. And so we were made aware by a pedestrian using the bike path along Garden Highway of an excavation that occurred in the levee. And this was March, April timeframe. We got a picture of the excavation. It was about 20 feet by 30 feet wide, about 4 feet deep. And so it was a concern. So that was on a Thursday afternoon. We saw it in person. Monday morning, and it just so happened that the excavation site had been voluntarily evacuated by the individual that was residing there. We came back on Monday morning to make the repairs, and it was covered back over again with tents and tarps. So had we not received that picture from the concerned citizen, we would have no idea that this was going on underneath these tents and tarps. And so we immediately, board took action and authorized me to send a letter of request to local law enforcement agencies require immediate assistance for the removal of the encampments on our levee system. The problem is that there was a decision out of Boise, Idaho in 2018 called the Martin decision, where a homeless individual sued the city of Boise, Idaho about their camping ordinance. And out of the Ninth Circuit court there, it was ruled that resting is a basic human right. And in the absence of enough shelter space or bed space for homeless individuals, that the municipalities or other public agencies couldn't enforce a camping ordinance to remove them from a public property. Well, guess what? Lots of municipalities got scared of lawsuits from that decision, and they backed really far off of enforcement of camping ordinances or other activities that are associated with homeless encampments. We took the position as RD 1000 to say there was a footnote in that Boise decision that said not all applications of public property are applicable to this decision, and there are special circumstances. So we sent out a letter. Sorry, this is a long dialogue, but I think it's important. We sent out a letter in May asking for immediate assistance. We got tremendous help from Sac County Regional Parks, and we were able to remove 81 encampments along a 6-mile stretch from Gateway Oaks Parkway down to Northgate. We found 3 excavation sites in that area, received numerous media coverage from that. If I look familiar, it's probably because you saw me on the news, from KCR3 to Fox 40, Bloomberg News in London, if you were over there. So anyway, it was a great introduction to the district, and from that, with that media coverage came some attention from some electeds as well. And so we were able to work with the legislative staff from the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and introduce AB 137, which was a levee protection bill that would actually strengthen existing law from degradation, but also include prohibited activities of concealment and visual and physical obstruction of the levee. That was our problem. We knew that the tents were there. We couldn't see what was going on underneath, and we want to preclude that from occurring. So for us, it's not a homelessness issue. It is a levee protection and public safety protection issue for us. We understand there has implications to homelessness and there's other societal issues, but for us, and what I tried to make clear in negotiations and conversations was that if someone went up to Folsom Dam today with a jackhammer and started digging into and jackhammering away Folsom Dam, guess what?
Yeah, exactly.
They would be thrown in federal prison and they would be charged with terrorist acts, right? So for us, the levee system provides the same level of public safety benefit as Folsom Dam. We take it for granted because we drive across the top of it. We don't even, a lot of the community doesn't even know that the levee's there and what it provides. I was at the bank today and the banker had no idea what RD 1000 did and what the levees were there for. And he's lived in the Natomas Basin for 20 years. And so that's a problem. So AB 137 died in appropriations for reasons unbeknownst, probably of political infighting. But we are prepared to introduce that again, and we've talked to Senator Pan and Assemblymember Cooper to run companion bills in the Senate and Assembly as soon as session begins in January.
Earlier when he had a question about the fence being moved in, and you talked about the footprint coming down just next to the fence, but you also talked about SMUD easements. Does that mean the SMUD easements, the power poles, will be inside the fence as we know it now?
They will likely be right along where the fence is now.
Okay.
Again, it varies a little bit along there. They would be on the south side of the new fence by at least a couple of feet, most likely.
So I've lived here since 1989, and I can't remember what year it was, but you have already put in, I thought was like I don't know the language, a slurry wall. So is that slurry wall no longer compatible to what, or it doesn't meet the requirements? It's no longer sturdy. Can you sort of address, because we've had this happen here before.
That seepage cutoff wall is 1 foot wide. It is that our tests show that we are not facing an under seepage issue. Those seepage cutoff walls are typically for under seepage and only somewhat for through seepage. The adjacent levee that we're constructing is to bolster the current levee, which is made from historic sand dredge material that came from the Sacramento and American River bottoms. That material was dredged up and placed, shaped. You've got a levee. That's the way things were done previously. With the current state of Natomas and the growth that's slated for Natomas, that's not the appropriate level of protection that we want. This levee will be, this adjacent levee will be select material. It will be placed in layers and compacted very strongly as it is placed. And so that will be protecting from through seepage. And the existing cutoff wall with this adjacent levee will work in conjunction to reduce the flood risk.
Hi, so I just wanted to talk some more about SMUD. So is SMUD working with these organizations, or are they working separately? Because I find it hard to believe they couldn't put the power underground instead of above the ground.
It could go underground. It's about 4 times as expensive to do, and it can't go on the levee. So they'd have to find somewhere to get off the levee, but still come up with poles and span the levee to serve power to the folks on the water side of the levee. So it's a cost issue, it's a practicality issue of you still have to be above ground to provide service to a number of folks. So it doesn't make sense to underground it.
During the construction process, will your construction trucks need to drive through our property here to do their work?
We are, at this stage, we have just begun the constructability analysis. That said, so we can't say for sure, but I think we're pretty comfortable saying very probably not.
Good answer.
How will all this be funded?
We have we are currently a federally authorized project, and we get federal appropriations. SAFCA and DWR provide a local match, so I need to let them talk about their sources, although it's my understanding their sources are stable and existing. the federal appropriations, while we are, that's a very good question, because if for whatever reason we've been getting consistent federal appropriations, but if for whatever reason we don't receive federal appropriation, the construction won't happen. The whole Natomas Basin project could just stop. But we anticipate our federal appropriations, which have been very consistent, we anticipate them continuing. And when the federal appropriations come forward, that with the local match is how the construction will be funded.
So the federal government provides about 65% of the funding. The state and locals provide the other 35%, of which about 10% is the local community, being Natomas, you folks. We came out with 3 different assessment districts, and you all voted to put those in place. So that's where the local match is coming, is from all of you folks in the audience.
So that's existing?
That's existing, that will continue. And because we did the green, most of the rest comes from the federal government. We have credit for all the money we spent.
After you build this beautiful fence, who owns it?
That is subject to negotiations. We don't necessarily need it. It is you folks who need it, and we would build it if you want to own it and maintain it. As long as there's control of you're not running your golf carts up and down the slope of the levee, then we're fine with you guys owning it.
How far up the side of the existing levee will be the top of the new levee?
Almost the same height. And by almost, I mean...
So highway height?
Yeah.
There was a building moratorium for 10 years in Natomas, and then all of a sudden it got lifted because we were flood safe, our flood evidently, and tens of thousands of people moved in. So can you tell us why we were safe 10 years ago and all of a sudden we're not?
No, I'm not pointing at the people who should answer. I'm pointing at the representatives of the 2 agencies that are responsible. SAFCA and DWR. The construction of all that levee you see in green is what caused the transition from the building moratorium to no building moratorium.
Regarding the cost of the attorneys for the association, is that going to fall on all the members in the association, or can you request funds from the federal government?
It is my understanding that that expense will be borne by the association, and that does have an impact on our budget. It's a necessary, very necessary cost.
Is there a possibility of having a concrete wall instead of a fence?
One of the problems is, people like the trees and the existing fence because of sound attenuation and everything like that sort. To build a sound wall at the base of the levee, that's going to have to be 20 or 30 feet tall.
That would
to
work.
do
Be good.
any sort of things like that, and just the cost of that is, prohibitive. So it's likely not that we're going to have a sound wall there along the toe of the levee. One of the things long term that RE 1000 needs to do is, as they're down along the toe in their flood fight, they need to look in the fairway and make sure that they don't have boils or anything else that is coming up. That is, we missed something, or we got gophers or a beaver or whatever digging in the levee. So we need to be able to look and see that the levee is performing properly else.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, at the landside toe of the levee, there's an access road that RE 1000 will use for maintenance of the levee and then patrol during the high water flood fight events.
Okay, at this point, we'll take one more question.
Okay, so I'm in the process of possibly buying a house here right now, and it's right on fairway number 4. And so I want to ask some more questions about these trees. Now, you're going to build the levee to the fence line. Why do you need to take a bunch of trees out that are inside the fence line?
They're outside.
Oh, they're outside?
Outside.
They're outside, okay. So once we get this fence in place, I don't know what committee takes care of this in here. Is this committee planning on planting anything after the construction is over? And if so, what? And also, can we do ivy or anything else to cover this big old messy area?
No ivy.
Sarah, do you want to answer that? It's not really there.
You know, that's something we'll have to look at down the road, and what our limitations are from, we'll have to take some guidance from them as to what we can and cannot put in. Tree roots, I understand, are problematic somewhat, so we're gonna have to work in concert with them. And we do have a landscape committee. I think that they would be the ones that would be our voice, and also with the Levee Project Committee, maybe they can work together, but I think that's a little ways down the road.
A long ways down the road.
We have about 15 minutes, you guys. I'm going to put these cards and pencils in case you didn't want to ask a question or you want a follow-up question with us. We'll follow up with you. Are there any more questions while these people are here? We have one more question.
Did you say you're not going to core the center of the levee up here? The 50-foot core? You know where we had the slurry seal before?
There's an existing seepage cutoff wall in
that 25-footer you put in way back.
I believe it was 1991 where a 1 foot wide a seepage cutoff wall was installed. That's currently existing. Yes, that's in Garden Highway.
How deep was that?
50 feet. 35.
I was going to say because it doesn't work.
Okay.
2005, when it was raised, the water was up to that mansion's basement. The Rasno court was floating. The garbage trucks would drive through there and the court would go like this. So keep that in mind.
One more good question.
Okay. Thank you very much for that knowledge.
You said that you're going to negotiate taking property from us. I know you're going to take one house, but if you're only putting the levee down to the base of our fence, you're not really taking any of our property. You're affecting our property, golf playability and so forth in the city. But you're not necessarily taking any of the property if the levee is 2 to 1 and it's coming down to the base of our existing fence. So what would we be negotiating? What would be losing as far as land value, physical land value, not aesthetics, besides the one house?
Well, the process is we have to move the existing city water line. That requires buying an easement. We have to move the smud poles. That requires buying an easement. The area that we're occupying at the toe of the levee is an easement owned by the Natomas Central Mutual Water Company. It allows for a canal and a road. Doesn't allow for levee improvements. So we have to buy a flood control works easement. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the acquisition, and your appraiser and your attorney will, give you their opinion of what that cost is. And then the other physical items that will be looked at is, the moving the fence line, various other things that they'll develop a list, I'm sure.
I was just asking, who gets that money? Does Swallows Nest get that money, or do we, as homeowners, get a check for $20,000? What?
Oh, I have no idea.
We have no idea.
Okay, so
that
they'll get back to you.
We have no idea.
Okay, so I think we can close at this point. Unless if you have additional questions that you'd like for the Corps or SAFCA to answer, please write them down on the index card, which are on the front table. Thank you very much for your attendance and cooperation. And we do want to thank our guests for coming out, right? Yay! All right. We appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming, and again, a big Nestor round of applause for the folks who are taking the time to come to see us. Thank you guys. Good job.